G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we're talking Bogs and Flogs from round 20, talking the chopping block, who's our trading targets for the next round with some special guests on the show. Let's go!
She's done it from nowhere. Lifted the goal from inside the centre. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty. Now Teddy from Petrarca. Oh, wow. How good is that? The legend becomes immortal.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter at Ball Boys Fantasy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Luke Roderson. How are you, mate?
Really, really good. And you mentioned it in the intro, but I'm most excited for this episode because we're talking with a couple of very special guests. Now,
yes,
they're waiting in the wings for us, but before I introduce these special guests, I want to talk about some deceitful...
Hold on. We're not starting the show with this,
We are starting the show with this. Let's just look at me, not at Mitch. There was some treason that occurred over the weekend, people. Now, some of you guys might be able to cast your minds back and recall that Mitch and his top two big boys, he had Bontempelli and Tim Taranto up there. And you might also recall that both of them did shithouse. But on top of that, you'll actually be a little bit pissed off to know, I think, that Mitch's captain didn't actually do shithouse on the weekend because he cartwheeled and fucking went LDU in the last game.
Hold on a
so
second.
this is treason of the highest order. He's sent out the big boys. He has made sure that he's just sent everyone off on their merry way so that he can swoop in and get a good captain's choice. And it's terrible that I have to do this, but it's unfortunate, and I'm outsourcing my big boys this week.
Oh no, he's outsourcing. He's roofing
official.
up for you.
2 weeks in a row, as well as the treason.
Hey,
It's
hold on.
done.
Last week, Doherty won 30. Not my fault. Your team shit. You don't have him. So he was number 2.
No, I like my point better. Treason, everyone. Now, okay, we've left the guests in the wings too long. Mitch, who have we got with us today?
Okay, well, after all that, we'll move on to the show and introduce our fine guests from the AFL Fantasy Fanatics podcast. We've got Tim Guest and Bales from Chili Bales HD's YouTube channel as well. Welcome, boys. Welcome to the show.
G'day, boys. How are ya?
Yes, very good, mate. Sorry you had to listen to Mum and Dad fighting at the start of the show there, but how are you guys doing?
Mate, there's chaos is going through the community at the moment because, Calvin was back in sick dog for the captain, right? So, mate, who do we trust for our captains? I don't know.
Well, g'day everyone. I trust Mitch's original Ball Boys because I put up the original number 1 VC, which we'll talk about later on. But
how many goes do you get at it? Is my question. I reckon if I throw enough mud at the wall, something will stick.
Well, hold on. Let me just say. First of all, we've got the great man Tim Guest on the show today. I am going to blame him for the deception this week because the Content Creators Cup is it's the league of glory around the AFL fantasy community. So there's high stakes there. So being as though I'm away from a hat this point of year, I'm prioritising that. So my matchup came down to the last couple of guys.
He fucking won his matchup too, the prick.
And he had the C on Taranto. And I, 180 average between Steele and Sheasel. When Steele had 110, I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to just match the Timmy T C, so I swapped it over to LDU, got a W, and I'm averaging 125 my last 2 weeks of captain. So
I mean, to be fair, it was good fantasy play, but sitting on my couch, I was fucking writhing. I almost got the fucking eggs out of the fridge and throw them at your house.
You got the week off now as well, mate. Got the week off.
I can kick my feet up.
Oh, yeah. Great that you're sitting pretty while everyone else that looks at the big boys is cooked.
But yes, so lots of obviously the big boys. We've got to do some soul searching this week, but we won't talk big boys. I've got a few days to sort of collect myself and see if I can print off another qualification there. But
well, the boys have been kind enough to help us out with the Bogs and Flogs this week. So should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
And the winner of the Norm Smith Medal.
You're an embarrassment to what you do, mate. You're an embarrassment.
We've got the Bogs and Flogs, and I've given the Bogs to the boys over at the AFL Fantasy Fanatics because they are coming into this podcast off the back of huge weeks. I think both you guys scored 2,600 plus on the weekend. Is that right?
Yeah, mate.
Wow.
Bale's top scored, mate. You take it away, mate.
26-30 for me. So never scored over 2,500 before, but also cracked the 2,600 barrier. So very happy. I pipped him by 9 points. I was nervous. He had Sheasel coming home strong, and luckily he didn't get the 9 extra points to get me. So I think you got, was it 26-21, Tim?
26-21, yeah. Moving me up a fair bit as well. So from 393 to 240 in the overall rankings. So I think I'm about 205 points off a hat. So, it's in reach, but a bit of work to do.
Mate, you keep putting up scores like that and you'll close it down in no time. So you're the Bogs of the Content Creators Cup this week. So let's start us off with the Bogs for this first game, Collingwood versus Carlton. Who did you guys nominate for this one here? I'll throw it over to me. I'll throw it to you, Jess.
I had him on. I had him in my team. I actually looped him as well with Windhager. So Darcy Cameron, and to be perfectly honest, I was pretty worried about him as well. Obviously he's had a lot of scores recently, kind of, 70s, 80s, that kind of stuff. And that F6 spots. I mean, a lot of people had Flanders. I mean, you had McRae in there. So I was a bit worried about losing points there. And I even considered maybe just running straight Windhager and trading out of Darcy Cameron, but held on to him. It came out, can't quite remember what he scored in that first quarter, but he had a massive first quarter, a bit of a quiet second half, but yeah, scored really well, and I think he ended up second or equal second highest scorer for the game. So I think he takes out the Bog for that game.
A very worthy Bog. I think I was looking at the stats, and for some reason I thought you'd trade him out, and I looked over at your team, and because you looped him, I saw he wasn't in your starting thing. I was like, oh, Tim's going to be pissed because he's traded him out, but then I noticed the loop, and good to go. It was he was good to loop him on. Flog for this game. I'm just going to give it to George Hewitt. There was probably a few candidates for this award, but George Stewart is a guy that I think a few people would have traded in the last couple of weeks as a real cheap option. Obviously went all right last week against the Eagles, but came crashing back to earth with his score here. I think he was mid-60s. So just a reminder for us all at this stage of the year. Hopefully a lot of you guys have a full team of premiums, but for those who needed that cheap option, he definitely hurt having him on your field, in your midfield as well. So George Hewitt, flog behaviour.
Now, Freo, that he rolled the Cats this weekend as well, and Bales, you've identified a Bog out of this game.
Yeah, well, it was me and Tim discussed before. There's two guys that probably could get a bit of a shout. So Andrew Brayshaw's the one that 122. I think that's his second score over 115 in his last 6 or something. So it's good to see him finally put up a pretty good score, and that's what we paid him for. And the other guy as well did pretty well was Tom Stewart in a tough matchup against Freo. He struggled against them earlier in the year, and he put up 112. So, both of them were very, very good.
Yeah, and there's been a little bit of talk in recent weeks about people potentially trading out Stewart as a point of difference, but he's kind of showing that maybe do that at your peril. So interesting one there. I agree on those ones, Bales. Now the flog for this game, he actually turned up Caleb Sarong, but you guys know you guys know the theme of this show. It's all about us, and so once in true form, it's about me again. Because if Caleb Sarong doesn't get suspended, Caleb fucking Daniel is never in my team.
Oh no!
And so it's sliding doors. So sorry, Caleb, you got a ton, but
Caleb.
Correct. I've got feelings left over. Yeah. So yeah.
Both those boys, both Brayshaw and Sarong, pretty highly owned, and really haven't been getting it done of late. I mean, Brayshaw obviously got his 122, but yeah, there's probably I don't know, maybe a bit of room for movement there.
Yeah, low tons aren't getting it done at this time of the year, are they? Correct.
Not if we have scoring like we did on the weekend.
Yeah. No. Maybe sitting pretty there with your 2600, you can scoff at 122 there, Tim. But I'm taking that for sure. Let's move on to the next game: Bulldogs versus GWS. Best on ground. Who have you got here, Tim?
It's got to be the Rock Llama, mate. Tim English, mate. I mean, not the best of matchups as well, going up against GWS.
One of the worst matchups, actually. But it doesn't matter for him.
And also being at Mars, right? So, I know, paying attention to a lot of those games out at Mars over the last couple of years, weird stuff happens. I mean, we know the Small Potatoes got a pretty, rough history out there. Even Bond getting it done and falling away, But yeah, Timmy, 153. I mean, how can you can't turn your nose up at that. He's got to get the Bog for the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I've reminded myself after the game that Tim English matchups mean nothing.
Don't worry about it.
Just mean nothing. And it actually is, I don't know if you've checked the stats on him, but every second week he is putting up a ton. It is I think it's continued since round 6 this season that he puts up a massive ton, goes under 100. Massive ton, under 100. So he's going to have a down game this week, and then next week he's going to go another big boy. So I'm going to have to factor that into the equation.
I saw Calvin put up a stat, actually, just literally before we went live. He said that Tim English, 8 of 9 games away from home, has gone over 120, and he's only gone 2 of 10 games over 120 at Marvel. So...
There you go. That's some good stats there. He plays at Marvel this weekend. Flog for here. I'm going to let you take this one because
let me cook. Let me cook it because Caleb Daniel. It doesn't matter what position you play on the field. 39's not going to cut the mustard.
That is disgusting.
Dead said, I almost needed a welfare check after this game. This is ridiculous. I wasn't watching, but I was actually being
good that you.
I was actually being a good son-in-law and helping my my parents-in-law take some stuff to the tip, and I was watching the scores on my phone, and I thought Caleb Daniel must be deceased. I thought, what is possibly happening? He's been on 39 for the best part of half the game, so I didn't watch. I don't want to watch, and to be honest, it's just fucked up. 0
points in the last quarter, did not get near it, and just played on a wing in half back, no CBAs. So it just absolutely killer coming back off 109 the week before.
I'm getting rolled up. Let's move on.
Moving on to the Gold Coast versus Brisbane, the Q Clash. And the Gold Coast get over the boys from Bris Vegas. Best on ground. I'll throw it over to you here, Bales, your boy.
Yeah. The guy that you had number 1 on your big boys week.
Number 1 big boy.
You shouldn't have changed it, mate. Josh Dunkley.
I'm going to go back and delete that tweet and just have the original.
So because obviously you jumped on with us for the pre-lockout chat before the Friday night game, and you were saying that, and I was really tempted to change my VC after, and I obviously watched the clip, and I was like, I'll just chuck the VC on him because just like it's a VC. I've got Taranto captain, who we'll talk about him later, I'm sure. But Dunkley, 137, huge third quarter. I'm glad I didn't put the Moz on him after 3/4 time. But very, very big score. And if you don't have him, he would be a high target, I think.
So, Guesty, do you think that it's fair to say that, like, when it comes to the VC, there's no point in jumping at shadows? Like, we saw Bontempelli strapped calf 2 weeks ago. Some people jumped at that, missed a 1.
Yes.
128,
Do you think that's fair to say? Like, don't bother jumping at shadows?
No, I don't think it's fair. I think you got to kind of, like this time of the season, there's some calls you got to make, and I think you just got to, I actually kind of lambasted bloody Bales about saying this last week, like go with your gut, but I actually kind of think there are times when you do that. Now, for me, when I watched that footage of Dunkley, it did send a little bit of a concern through my head, but I guess the thing that I kind of told myself is, well, of course he's still going through rehab. I mean, he only just come back. Like, it's not like you're at 100% and they stop doing rehab as soon as you're back at a game. So I just I wanted to hang on to it, and I really did like that matchup. And look, I had no confidence going in Bont, and one of the things that I did, and this is one of the things that I've learned so much about this year. Having the pod and having so many guests on, I've got to learn from a lot of great coaches. And I actually just went into the website and I looked at his venue average, Bont's venue average against at Mars, and it was 10, 15 points lower than most of his other venues, and that was enough of a flag for me. Of course, I felt a bit stupid at half-time when I think he was on 80 or 70, along those lines, but it ended up paying off. So sometimes you got to make these calls, and sometimes you got to. I mean, that's the other thing about I'm sure we'll talk to when we get to that game, but the Roma, the Max Gorn. Really, when we look at the Roma news, the only evidence that we had of his soreness was really Ross saying it. Like, we hadn't really seen any hard evidence. So, you kind of got to try and weigh these up. And Ross is not known for being that honest. So maybe he wasn't bloody honest.
He's just a bald-faced liar.
maybe. So, I think these are you got to analyse these little tidbits of news and, try and make a call. And maybe that's what's going to get your head in these last parts, especially when teams are so similar.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, while Dunkley was carving up, his midfield counterpart was not carving up. And this guy's kind of shown that he's susceptible to a little bit of attention throughout the year, and this just
I think Roy tweeted this one, but he's booked himself a tag for the rest of the season. When you get clamps like that, and it affects the team as well, you're getting beat by Gold Coast. And
we talk about Lachie Neale, by the way.
Lachie Neale, yeah. So I think Lachie Neale can get the floor keeper. Probably also equally responsible is Tuke Miller, giving him the old giving him the tag as well.
But did you see he gave him the old?
That wasn't Neale. That was
was that? So, well, he's grabbing somebody's nuts. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's an alpha move.
Yeah, it's we're not encouraging that, but if you have to do it to anyone, Zorko's probably the guy to do it to. But spicy. But Brisbane fans probably won't like me saying that.
No, we're gonna get.
But yeah, I think Neil's gonna. We'll talk about the trade out targets and the chopping block later. But obviously, we'll
see.
Asks too many questions that we want to be answering at this time of the year. On the Essendon and Sydney game, best on ground. Who have we got here, Bales?
Can I throw to Tim for this one? Just because I want the next game. The next game on Friday.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, this one was really tough. I mean, Gordon and Merrett just scored so similarly. I mean, I kind of wanted to give it to Merrett over Gordon just because he kind of did it for 4 quarters, whereas Gordon basically didn't do much in that first quarter and then kind of came alive. So, that always just worries me with the player. But, I mean, look, the other thing I think, they're both very highly owned players. And, I mean, especially with the run, which we'll talk about with the trade-in targets like the Essendon run coming up. I think you can't really avoid him. But, yeah, how can you split 2 blokes playing like that?
140s, yeah. Highly owned players, potentially some VCs and captains there as well. So, yeah, they definitely played well. This other guy did not. Callum Mills, who luckily I traded him out last week. I was a bit salty when he kicked 2 goals and outscored the guy who I traded in, but more happy this week after I've traded him out. He's just an absolute shadow of himself and playing obviously a shit role now. I think he played a bit more in defence and on the wing as well. But yeah, it's one of the biggest disappointments of the season this year, I would say. Callum Mills, fall from grace, and he's going to be cheap for us next year, but it's kind of getting to the point where for next year we want to.
Do you even want to go there?
Yeah, we want him to show us something. So it's just he's a must trade at this point.
I only just thought about this, so I'm kind of just throwing this in there. Is it purely role, or do you think he's
I don't think
not
it's purely role. I don't think that because he was in the role weeks prior to the last couple, and he still wasn't scoring as well. He was going 90s. And I think it's the Errol factor. I think is probably something that we're not speaking enough about. I think Errol, like one of the reasons that Callum Mills was such a good scorer is because he got the tackles, but he also got those uncontested marks and those sort of like sheep 45 kicks, and that's Errol's bread and butter right now, and he's getting a lot of that, and he's probably a better user than Mills. So fair enough that Sydney want the ball in his hands a bit more. So I think the rise of Errol is happened to the demise of Callum Mills, who, like we sort of said, is too good at being unselfish and the consummate professional, which is not necessarily what us fantasy managers want. So, yeah.
And really shout out to Gordon as well. I mean, he does better without the CBAs. Like, I mean, there's not a player really like him that scores like he does without really having that full CBA midfield role. It's just
incredible. Yeah, for sure. But, Mills definitely someone who, if you have him in your team, you're definitely feeling the frustration. Let's move on to the Adelaide showdown. Port versus Adelaide Crows. And Bales is celebrating. He's coming off the high, Adelaide, with the victory. Who is the best on ground for your boys over in Adelaide there?
There's 23, and actually 24, I should say. Well, there's how many the assistant coaches are, the coach, the players. It was a great game. Obviously, went to the game and very happy with the win. But the best on ground goes to the guy that's been best on ground for the Crows for pretty much every game that he plays, and it's Jordan Dawson, 134, just continues to excel. I didn't see him being a midfielder when we got him, and he's gone in that role, and he's just absolutely smashed it week after week. He's second highest score, I think, in the comp behind English. So he's been fantastic. But I've got to shout out my boy. It's in the contract. Rory Laird, 115. It was very odd not owning him for the first time in a long time, but he scored well and could be a potential target.
Yeah, I think Luke Leary forgot he had him. He was cheering him on, watching the game, just like he was his own player. But yeah,
just a big Lairdy fan, mate. It was good. It's contagious. Now,
I want to take this flog because I've got
don't spend too much time on it. It's a fantasy.
I know, but this really rubs me the wrong way because the Port's team doctor.
It rubs you the wrong way enough for you to tweet about it too.
It fucking gives me the shits because us fantasy managers have to cop players being suspended over bullshit tackles. That are just regular tackles for them trying to protect the player's health when something like this is the actual thing that we need to be stamping out of our game. And so in a roundabout way, us fantasy managers are fucking getting the brunt of this because team doctors are not doing their job and not even looking at a player for a concussion test when he's clearly concussed.
I think, to be fair, this will get a lot of commentary this week, but like most of the teams and most of the doctors, I think, do like a really, really good job.
But this was
it looked
blatant.
It looked like Lear definitely was seeing stars at least for a bit there. And
anyway, flog act, and I think something needs to happen about this because I don't want our players being suspended over bullshit tackles.
You would have been cheering if it was your fantasy player come back on. You would have been like, well done, Doc. Yeah. Well done, Doc. Keep him around. Give him a pay rise.
The fact it's a Lear, I can get all high and mighty about it and no one has him. But, I just think, it's just, it's a bit shit. But, so definition of a flog act.
Yeah, just quickly on that, just watching it at the game, like the screens, everyone around us, because I was on the opposite side, but we saw it, and as soon as it happened, we all said both are knocked out. They're both going to be out for the rest of the game. So, and we're all thinking, well, we just hope they're okay. And then all of a sudden, we're like, Lockie Jones subbed out migraine, and I'm like, that's a funny coincidence. And then bloody Lear comes on 6 minutes, and we're just like,
they're both in concussion protocols now. Yeah. So I think they have admitted that they should have gone through that test, but we'll move on and we'll talk fantasy.
I can see Guesty just itching to tell us about the Bog for the next game because quite a unique player for him and scored really, really well. Talk to us, Guesty.
His boy. So have a listen to these stats, boys. 108 in his last 5, which makes him the 5th highest averaging defender in the last 5. Only 3% owned in the top 100 and 5% owned in the top 1,000. It is my boy, Gavin Wanganeen-Malera, mate.
I'm glad when you messaged us in the chat the other week that we both said, go that way, because if we hadn't offered he did this, you would have been pretty PO'd.
Yeah, and look, big concerns about the tag because obviously Finn McGuinness has been going to the outside player, not the inside, and Sinclair's been playing more inside. But he was a unique player for me, so I just wanted to hold him just for the sake of being unique and kind of just, cross my fingers and hope. Knowing that they would most likely want to tag Sinclair, even though Sinclair was going to probably play inside and just hope that it worked out. Yeah. And it did, and I think I actually probably should have looked at his quarter-by-quarter stats, but he probably could have gone a lot higher as well. I think he was on
80, I think 82 at half-time, I think.
Yeah, 82 at half-time, so to finish on 125. And, the last probably 10 minutes or so, he didn't really score that much. So, I kind of thought he might have gone 130 or 140, but being unique, especially when someone like Doc goes an 80, was it an 83? Was really good for me. So, he definitely gets it.
And shout out to Crouchy as well, 133 goals.
Mate, he's back,
big time. He was everywhere in that first half. A couple of goals, I think, in there as well.
And Adelaide looks so good with that midfield mix too.
Yeah. Now, Flog from this game, he scored a 95, which is not the worst, but for all the hype around Sicily taking on the Saints and that matchup, I think people were expecting 180. So to get 95, I think a few people would have been quietly disappointed.
Well, he had 165.
Did the Kelvinator confirm he put the C on?
I believe he did.
He did.
I believe he did.
That's rough.
Didn't hear much about it in the podcast today, though.
I can imagine.
He actually scored better once Blank came on. He was a bit better in the second half. It was just Blank sucked.
Which has always been the thing for me.
Freed him up a little bit.
Yeah, that's always been the thing for me. Yeah. So move on to this game. We'll probably do this one really quickly because it hurts too much. Richmond versus Melbourne. Best on ground Bales. Who have we got here?
Big Maxi Gorn, like 131. If people did have the balls to make that move and go Marshall to Gorn for the safety, you gain yourself 17 points and a lot of cash gen. And surely they can't bring Grundy in. Like I know there's been talk about does he come in this week because of North Melbourne with Cherry and Goldie, but Gorn is if he was doing this all year, he'd be the All-Australian ruck.
He effectively scored 100 in the second half as well. Like I
think 50 points in the last quarter as well. So huge.
Absolutely.
Got his butt ripped by Goodwin as well.
I can imagine.
Yeah. Flog, you got an interesting name here, Luke.
I've put Mitch as the Flog, so I had to sit and watch Taranto captain. So enough said. Anyone else who had to do that?
Hey, if you just
we're boycotting the big boys.
Hey, the other three of us on this podcast all followed the big boys, and we all got 120 plus scores. So it's just you, mate. It's just he doesn't respond to your coaching. All right, we'll move on. We'll move on before he knocks me out here. West Coast versus North Melbourne. Last one, round us out here, Tim. Who's the best on ground?
Mate, so once again, this is another guy that people, if not already on, should be looking to get on, and that's because he's got a 120 average in his last 3, which is the second probably just midfielders actually in the last 3 average, and that's LDU. Got a lucky goal there at the end to get him up to the 120, but cheap and on a good run, so bring him in.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't agree more. Luke, who's the flog for this one?
The flog's Mitch again because he got to watch LDU get 120.
Cool.
And I had to sit there with my Taranto. So you're noticing a theme through this podcast.
All right, let's move on, and we'll. Should we throw it over to the man himself here to run through? Let's throw it over to Guesty and go through the Infinite Wealth and the Content Creators Cup summary of the round. We're in the first week of finals. What's happened in this first round?
I can do my spiel.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're on, mate.
The AFL Content Creators Cup, proudly brought to you by Infinite Wealth, helping you reach your financial goals faster. We're winning coaches will get $5,000 for their favourite charity. Now a reminder, there's something special for every coach available too. So head across to infinitewealth.com.au/AFL Fantasy to claim your free 5-module online learning program, the Fast Track to Freedom, and learn how I bought 13 properties and retired by the age of 27. And I'll also teach how to pay off your mortgage up to 3 times faster, how to save thousands on tax every year, and how to build your wealth and replace your income up to a passive income of about $2,000 a week. So I got a webinar coming up on the 8th of August. So head along to that infinitewealth.com.au/AFL Fantasy. If you download the program, they'll put you on the list. We'll send an email out to you about the webinar and you can register and get on for that. But Mitch, I know you've been through the program. I think, Luke, you've been doing it as well, mate. Is that right?
Yeah, man, I'm getting through. I'm not fully complete yet, but sitting down.
A bit to do.
Well, that's it. I'm making time to watch those videos, especially with a bub at home at the moment. Got a little bit of time on my hands when she's sleeping, so yeah, ticking it off.
Yeah, no, it's very good stuff. Would definitely recommend go and check it out. And why wouldn't you? Like, it's all free. Like,
free.
Go and educate yourself. And yeah, if
probably the big thing, like I said, I mean, this is something that my clients can pay up to $3,000 for, and it's something I'm making available to AFL fantasy coaches for free. So,
cash in, guys, for sure.
Exactly. You might as well take advantage of it, even if it's not something that you take, something that applies to you now. You can use it later. But yeah, just quickly, probably just whipping through the fixtures. Couple of qualifying finals this week. So it was it was me up against Junk Time Janitors, and I picked him at 26-21 versus 24-35. So getting the week off. Then Mitch got the week off as well, up against Nathan from Hat Chat, the Over Mullets, 25-58 to 25-44. And then the elimination finals, Louis, who's been doing great over the past few weeks, 25-43 beat Miller Times 24-03. And then Destroy also unfortunately bowed out against the Statesman 25-15. So I'm not sure what, I think it'll be like Nathan Miller time this week. Oh, hang on, I should probably go to the fixtures and have a look.
Statesman versus the Over Mullets and Junk Time versus Louis, say she. So
who was the top scorer for the round over the whole?
Bales, you want to take this one?
Oh, yeah, that was Bales.
I set you up the alley there.
Thanks, Luke. And then we're also in the top, because no one really cares about the content creator and who wins it. It's all about who's in the top 8 overall, and I've now snuck into 7th. So we're making a late charge for that. Okay. I'm probably not going to get the overall one, but hey. But no, good luck to all the coaches that are fighting it out in the final 6. So.
For sure. All right, let's move on to talk about some hot topics and some news over the weekend. All right, let's talk about some news of the week. We're talking a few injuries going this one, starting off with the Adam Cerra hamstring for Carlton. So not that many people had Adam Cerra, just more the fact that this might affect some of the roles moving around in terms of like George Hewitt, Sam Doherty, who's still getting lots of CBAs over there for Carlton as well. Do we like Sam Doherty as an inside mid player? Do you boys think that he's going to be scoring more in the role that he's been in the last couple of weeks versus prior to that?
I think it's game dependent. I think because we saw him score well against the Eagles in portions because there was parts where he went quiet and whatever. And he got a 130, so I think it doesn't matter where he is. I think it's probably matchup dependent. So the Saints this week, I think he'll go well regardless of where he plays because I think he'll get open for those sort of short +6s, but. Maybe if he plays a Bulldogs or someone like that, like a hard team to score against, even Carlton, again, like they're pretty hard as well. Like he might struggle a little bit playing midfield compared to being in defence.
He would struggle versus Carlton, seeing how he plays for Carlton. So that would be just getting you there, mate.
Mitch is always just fucking on your Bales. He's on
just getting you. Okay.
But I agree with you on that one, Bales, in terms of role dependent. I think that's like pretty natural that we see with most of those like big scorers as well. But
doesn't matter.
I think he's still going to be top 6, isn't he? So
just a little note there for Tom Stewart. He's playing those random CBAs. They've come back down again, so he's sort of back down to where we sort of expected him to be and still scoring well. So I think that's probably more where we'd want him to be. And checking in on the Bulldogs carousel. McRae, CBA's up. Caleb Daniels, CBA's down. Had 0 on the weekend. I think Bailey Smith also had 0 on the weekend as well. So also noticed that Bonds, whilst being tagged, moved a little bit more forward.
That's pretty natural.
In this game as well. So versus Richmond, you wouldn't expect them to tag him this weekend. So perhaps that maybe brings McRae down again if Bont goes back into the midfield. That's me hoping as someone to trade him out. But
it's Russian roulette there with the Doggies midfielders. Guesty, what did you think of Touk Miller, the tagger? What were your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, so the word on the street is that he actually went and requested that role.
I didn't hear the commentator say that.
Now, firstly, I think we talked before about it kind of provides a little bit of a blueprint. I think we should be a little bit concerned about Lachie Neale moving forward. But talking more so about that Gold Coast midfield, look, I wonder whether he might be back out of those CBAs next week without that kind of tagging role. Or you might see a Flanders come back in. Obviously, his Flanders CBAs went down this week, but I think that was purely just because of Took's role. I think that's probably what you got to watch a little bit is maybe that Gold Coast midfield mix. I don't know that he's back in. I mean, I got off him and I'm pretty happy to be off him. And I'm concerned about his role.
Does he go to Jordan Dawson this week?
I was just about to ask.
Sorry, Mitch. Yeah, I was going to say that's a bit of a concern.
Because I know you've been a bit worried about Laird being a tag target from a Swallow, because I think he's been tagged the last couple of times by him. So I don't know if they run like a double tag.
I could see it. I could definitely see it because it's such a big game because the Crows are, I think, 11th or something like that, and Gold Coast are 12th. I think this game probably knocks a team out of the finals race, so it's going to be quite a big game. So if Gold Coast want to get an edge, take out the two best players in the midfield for the Crows.
I think something interesting that Guesty alluded to there before is the fact of how does this influence Sam Flanders as well. So we saw that his CBA's dropped down. He was still managed to ton up just. Is he now, Bales, do you think, at a price where there's no point in going there because if you downgrade a premium to him, you might not make quite enough to get another premium up, or is there still a scenario where you go to Flanders this week?
Yeah, well, he's still at a cheap enough price, I think, that move can be done. I think it depends on what sort of play. Like, we had Cara on with us last night, obviously, AFL Fantasy Perth, and she's obviously doing very well. She is looking at maybe doing a Butters who's got Geelong and Geelong down to a Flanders for a little bit of a cash grab.
Yep.
Because Flanders was still sort of rolling up as that fourth midfielder, even though he was in the CBA. So I think 400s out of his last 5, I think he'll still be fine. It probably just affects maybe Noah Anderson is probably going to be affected there. Obviously, Rouse sort of scoring's been up and down anyway, and then maybe Touk sort of will have gains where have high CBAs and maybe go, as Tim said, might go back out of the rotation mix.
I did a bit of analysis on the top 6 forwards today, and I think that that F6, it's a mixture between Sheasel and Flanders as number 6, so he's definitely an option.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he just knows how to find the footy. Hey, I think
he's a thirsty boy.
I think in the Rezzies he's averaging like 139 or something insane. But definitely an interesting watch, those Suns midfielders.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's definitely still an option. Probably less enticing than he was a week ago, but still definitely an option. Moving on to the Sydney Swans game, a couple of injuries here. Rampy injured, Buddy Franklin injured as well, and also coming out today, he's retiring.
Yeah, the
as
big
well.
man, Buddy. So congratulations on a great career, I reckon.
Hanging it up, still has the record for the highest fantasy score of all time.
Is it 230?
204? 240?
204. When he kicked 13 goals, hey.
204, I think it was, yeah.
Insane.
The highest fantasy score of all time. So,
and me and Tim got to see his final 4 games when he played pretty well. So, yeah, shout out to the bud on an amazing career.
Don't know if that has too much fantasy implications, but you might see, especially more of that Rampy injury, you might see more of Callum Mills in defence as well, which he did spend a fair bit in the last game. Crows, your boys over there at Bales, they ran a very tight midfield rotation, I noted there as well, with Matt Crouch and the Laird and Dawson all going very, very high in terms of the CBAs. Not too many other people going through, with Crouch getting 21, Laird 22, and Dawson 23. The next highest was Schoenberg and Sloan in there as well. So that really does affect a player like Keys, and I sort of stressed it last week that he was a must-trade as a guy who is playing forward. Hopefully you were able to get off last week, but if you still have him in your team, I would emphasise again that he is a must-trade out in your side.
And I don't see that changing as well. Crouch is playing very, very good football from a team system sense, and he can't play anywhere else. Yeah, he can't play anywhere else. Laird can play defence, but they're not moving him out of the midfield. And Dawson's the midfield that can maybe push forward or in defence. So it's going to be probably top only about 4, maybe 5 players running through there.
We mentioned before Sinclair, who was tagged on the weekend because he wasn't playing inside the CBAs. He was playing off half-back. 0 CBAs for the game, which I thought was interesting.
Well, he started the game with the tag, and we know that McGuinness is a great tagger. And then when they sort of dropped that tag in the second quarter, we saw what a great player Jack Sinclair is. I think he had like a 60-point quarter or something. Yeah. So that certainly saved his scoring on the weekend. But just an interesting one there with no CBA, so we'll see whether that continues. Guesty, I'm keen. Sorry, did you have something on that?
Well, I was just going to say, I was very interested in the fact that he didn't move him into the inside when the tag was there. Like, we've seen him do that. I thought that was curious. I thought for sure that they would make that switch, but no, just stuck fat and sort of, just broke the tag by playing really well. What were you going to say to Guesty?
I was just going to ask Guesty. Guesty, you're a Shees owner, I'm correct?
Yeah.
So
I brought him back in.
Yeah, and what do you see as his role moving forward? So last quarter, I believe he went forward. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it looked like, obviously, kind of in the middle of the year there, it looks like they were kind of changing up his role, putting him in the midfield, sending him forward a little bit. Then they kind of talked about, we're going to put him back. And I think that's when Aaron Hall was coming into the side a little bit. And even Jack Siebel. But now, Aaron Hall's out of the side. Jack Siebel's been playing as a sub for the last few weeks. It certainly does seem to be the case that when Jack Siebel comes on, there's a little bit of a shift in Sheasel's role, which does worry me, but I'm also, I think Bales was telling me Clarkson's back this week.
Back this week, so, yeah.
I'm also now like, what happens now? Because, Clarkson, he had him in that cherry role at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
He's scoring 130s. I'm fingers crossed, man. That's what it goes back to. But, I think, I want to see Ziebel out of that sub role. It'd be nice to see him out of the side. Be nice to see him do an injury, the old man do a calf or something.
That's the old man's injury.
Just before he retires, just copy.
Buddy, retire.
Yeah, copy buddy. Do an injury and just get on out.
Mate, we're not.
I think he has retired. I think it's end of the year.
Yeah, he's announced
end of the year.
Yeah. We're not above wishing injuries on players here.
Hey, hold on. I'd never heard of such blasphemy. All right, let's move on to this next segment here.
I pulled the headband off from the front again. I don't know what I'm doing.
I do it every time at home. I always do it.
Let's go through the chopping block here. Now, I've done this list, but I want to get your boys' thoughts on the order in terms of what we're doing. If people have multiple of these guys, who are we prioritising getting out of our side urgently? So, number 1 here, I've got
Caleb Daniel.
Okay, he's on the list, but not at the top here. I've got Callum Mills. There's a few guys here that are pretty urgent, I reckon, though. Callum Mills, Ben Keys, then your George Hewitt, and then your boy Caleb Daniel there. I think all 4 of those guys are fairly urgent. I've prioritised Callum Mills at the top here because he is taking that midfield spot.
Yeah, cool.
And Ben Keys probably has the, lowest floor of them as well, but again, forward line. So those 2, I think, are the most urgent. George Hewitt is tough because he's going to score average, but his price is low. So if he's a guy on your
field... Got some good games to come, George Hewitt.
Yeah, so...
I want to hear the boys. Who you got in your shopping block? Who are you kung fu?
I've got Mills. He has to go. I'm sick of that guy. He's got to go. And we talked about Hewitt last night with Karen. We were saying that because he's so cheap, like you're gonna have to rob a bank to go up to someone, unless it's just Flanders or someone. But he's got Hawthorn this week. No Walsh, no Chera, no Kennedy. I don't believe Kenny will be back anyway. So he's going to be in the midfield. He's going to be one of the main guys. So you could hold. But yeah, Keys and Mills. Well, Mills and Keys are definitely the top 2. Tim, would you probably agree with that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And also because they're both taken up. Mills is definitely taken up that midfield spot. But yeah, Keys you've got to be worried about with his role as well.
Yeah, so I think those all sound alright. What about your boy Caleb Daniel? Like, do you traded out Mills this past week? So
yeah, so it was Mills or Daniel to go.
you had a lose situation.
For me. Well, I ended up getting the worst of the two, but
You'd be happy with the Mills in your side.
Let's put it this way: I wouldn't be here today if Mills had a turned up.
Yeah, true.
So, but yeah, I think Caleb Daniel. I mean, like, you can't look at a 39, can you? I know we don't want to be.
I also just think that the volatility of the role, the Bevo factor, you've got other guys, like he's got a bit of money in his head. You can still downgrade him to a Flanders and make some money and still maybe do something with your other trades. So I think he's fine.
One small sort of thing I'll just add with Caleb Daniel is his next 3 games. He's got Richmond at Marvel, Hawthorn at UTAS, and West Coast at Marvel. So, because if he's in your forwards, if you don't want to go to anyone because there's not many options besides maybe a Flanders.
So let's break it down. What's changed with him? Because he was getting midfield time, right?
No, he wasn't getting midfield time.
He was not this weekend.
Not this past week.
Yes.
Sorry.
So I guess he's saying like previous
and
weeks.
And then what? He went more to half back, and that's where he started scoring. But what we've seen, like this week, we saw Jason Johansson come back in, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that he kind of messed with that role? Is that?
It's been a tough watch. Like, I tried him in 3 weeks ago for his then lowest score of the season, which is like a mid-60s or something like that. And he had the role that night when I was watching. He was in the CBAs. He was around the footy. He just couldn't find it. And then last week he gave us sort of a 110, and you think, oh, it's not too bad. And then this week, I didn't watch the game, but I think Mitch was saying that he was just devoid of CBAs. There was all
nothing
wing
there.
time.
He was all on the wing. I think a lot of wing time.
I think
and
it's
then
just role
some
volatility
CBAs.
recently.
The other thing I also wanted to mention as well is Ed Richards was out of that game with illness. So you would maybe think that he comes back into the side and maybe that positively affects him because that's what moved him back into the midfield, I think, a few weeks ago when McRae shit the bed. So, look, for me, in terms of this time of the year, I'd rather just not be doing all this like maths and trying to figure out where all the Bulldogs players are playing when who's coming in. So he is a trade-out target for me. There might be some more pressing players in your team like a Mills or a Keys, but I still think at this time of the year, I'd rather not be relying on all these things to align for him to score well. And even when he does score well, it's like a 110. It's not like he's got a super high ceiling or anything like that. Yeah. So I still think he's definitely someone you can be reactionary and trade out.
Can I throw these next 3 guys over to Bales and get your opinion here, Bales? So I'll group these guys: Himmelberg, Windhager, Darcy, Cameron. What kind of order would you be looking to move those guys on in?
So it's tough with Windhager because he's been two sort of tons, and then he gets a 70. First half was great. Second half he got burnt. Mason Wood can piss off the amount of times he burnt Windhager on the weekend. Couldn't believe I was yelling at the pub, and I'm just like, Mason Wood, you idiot! But and probably a few more explicit ones, but yeah, Windhager. I think he's probably got to be the top just because that he's at the end of the day a rookie price player. I know it's his second year and whatever, but I'd have him number 1. I think I'd then have Himmelberg number 2. I think that there's too many guys back there. You've got Himmelberg, you've got Whitfield, you've got Lockie Ash, you've got even like Iden and Taylor and Buckley and guys like that get involved in that sort of +6 chains back there. So I know I got a 112 the week before, but I'd get rid of him. And then, Darcy Cameron, well, me and Tim were talking about it, so I probably want to see what Tim thinks about Darcy Cameron. But Hawthorn this week, he's got coming up, a bit of a tough game with Reeves back in, but I don't know if people should be necessarily moving off because is there anyone to go to in the forward line? But
yeah, the thing that concerns me about Cameron is we've seen in the past, like Collingwood, when they come up against these tall ruckmen, it was Witts a couple of weeks ago, that they have more of a tendency to want to play Cox in the ruck position.
Cox got subbed.
He did get subbed. He was god-awful as well. I think he had like 3 touches. So if he's not named, then it's obviously feels a lot better. But I just know that from history, those tall, tap ruckmen like a Witts, like a Reeves, those kind of guys, they prefer to play at Cox a little bit more than they normally would otherwise. But look, he's not the top priority, but I still think that I don't think he's a top 6 forward. He played a good game, still didn't ton up.
Yeah.
So
what are your thoughts, Guesty? Is there like a scenario where you can loop him again this week, or?
Oh, Oh, look, I think you really want to be getting off him. I think we kind of got away with one last week. Like, I was really worried when Pitt was in the side, Pitt was in the side, because he's a much tougher ruck matchup than Tom de Koning. But then I think what I saw in the game was that Pitt played a bit forward in that first quarter, and I think that really let Darcy Cameron kind of get a bit off the ball, and he had quite a good scoring first half. But then as the game went on, Pitt got more into the ruck. And that kind of really started to shut down Darcy's scoring. I mean, I think, we've got concerns like what Mitch just said about in terms of the role and how Collingwood play those taller rucks. But I think even if you just look at his scoring, I mean, what do we really expect from him? I mean, probably only an 85 or something along those lines. He's had scores along those lines, the past few weeks. And if you're looking at like a Flanders or a Sheaslin and F6, I mean, you would be hoping that those kind of players can go in triple figures. So I think it's just too many points to be losing at that F6 spot. The only other thing that I wanted to say about Marcus Windhager, and this actually wasn't my idea, this was Kara's idea last night when we were talking about it. This is brilliant. This is so far what I've done. I was thinking about first, I might hold Windhager and I might loop him and maybe just trade down another rookie that would get me to where I want to go. But if I actually trade down Windhager this week to a basement rook, 200k rook, or a Dante Vicente for 205k, it cashes me up like 400 odd K. I can do my trades, and then it still leaves me with like $272,000 in the bank for next week. So that'll allow me to do like a double move next week. So, I know like in my side, I've got a Butters and a Neil that I'm particularly worried about. It'd be nice to be able to get off both rather than just one. And I think that might give me a little bit of a leg up on the comp. So I think that's the play. Get the cash down. You might only be able to do a little upgrade this week, but you might be able to do 2 upgrades next week.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point too. Like, I think a lot of coaches might be finding at this time of the year that they actually have a little bit of cash on their bench. Like, if you own sort of 2 or 3 of the Eagles boys there, and there's people who still own Windhager and whatnot, you're looking at your bench thinking there's a little bit of cash there and cash on the bench means points left off the field. So it's going to be a bit of a battle to try and get that cash onto the field over the next few weeks. Yeah,
because we had a few injuries as well, so we haven't been actually doing rookie downgrades for the last couple. So, I agree with you. Those are sort of my moves as well, and especially, if you are in a finals or something like that and you do have that double shot and you've got 2 upgrades you can make next week, that might be something that you could definitely use. I know I'm cashing up this week because I can kick my feet up and relax there, so hopefully I can spend it next week.
So would you boys have it in that order? Would you have it Windhager, Himmelberg, Darcy Cameron? Is that the order we'd probably have it, or would you maybe swap Himmelberg and Windhager? Or
Look, I'd probably...
I just don't think you can have a Himmelberg on field. That's the only thing. He's going to kill it.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you've got, like, say these guys are all on field, I would probably rank it that way. I honestly think that Marcus Windhager could outscore a Himmelberg, and at least his price is going up. So if those guys are sort of, ideally you'd trade both. You'd trade a Windhager down and a Himmelberg up if that was sort of your option. But, say you had to pick and choose and you wanted to fix up a Keys or a Cale Daniel as well, then... I would prioritise getting the guy who's on your field to someone a bit better, and sort of upgrade your points that way. So that's sort of why I've ranked it that way. Let's talk about, just to finish off this chopping block here, a couple of maybe more luxury moves. A few of these guys in the midfield here. Lockie Neal, obviously tagged on the weekend. We think that potentially this might be a blueprint moving forward. Touk Miller, who did the tagging. Noah Anderson, who's getting affected by a few more numbers in the CBAs. And Zach Butters, who... a lot of us have, but it's just kind of a little bit of step off the top 5 forwards there. Bales, how would you sort of look at these guys, and do you think that any of these guys jump out at you as a guy that you'd be trading out?
So it was Butters, Touk, Neal, Anderson was the other 4? Yeah. Okay, so I know Cara was saying last night she's keen to move off of a Noah Anderson, just with that sort of role versatility, you just don't know. And he's at a price where you can get him to someone that's got a surefire role. You've got plenty of midfield targets, which I won't say many, because we'll go through them after, but there's plenty in the midfield that you can look at. I would look at jumping off Neal as well. I think that was a bit of a blueprint on the weekend. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the Traders boys said Hayden Young did a bit of a job on Dangerfield on the weekend, and then I think he's got the Crows a week after, so Ben Keys, you can pretty much lock that in. He'll go to him there. Those 2. Butters is another interesting one. He had that really good run where he's averaging about that 110 mark for about 6 weeks, but a lot of those games were easy gains for people to score in. So Down in Geelong this week, we know that he had that groin thing a couple of weeks ago. We don't know if it's still lingering, but he's another one. But the hard thing with him is who are you going to? Like, you might already have Sheasel, you might already have Flanders. Besides those two, if you've already got the top five, who are you going to? There's not really anyone that screams out. So, and then Tuke's the hard one. Like, sort of, if he keeps tagging, he's going to play midfield. Could he score right there? I don't know. Tim got over him last week. After a week, he saw enough. So, I think all of them can go. It's very, very hard to rank. It's probably who you can get to is probably going to dictate who.
I'll give it a crack. So I think Lockie Neal's the number one target to get out of those four. That tag is he can 50s, 60s for the next couple of weeks, and that will kill your chances. I would have put Zach Butters next, but I think the point that Bales made about who the hell do you go to? I mean, he's next if you haven't got a Dunks. He's next if you haven't got a Flanders, I think.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah, but I would probably take those out. I guess if you've got those players, I would then put Took next. And the reason I'm concerned about Took is because of that role. We talked about trading out Took and trading out Crouch and all that kind of stuff last week. And, when I saw Took doing that tagging role, I was like, oh my God, this is a masterstroke. This is, made my year, kind of thing, and thinking he was going to score a 40. But then he bloody outscored Neal. So, but I'm just really worried about that role. And then Anderson, I actually have a lot more confidence in him. I think he's probably the last one to worry about.
Yeah, definitely that tagging role week to week is a concern because, you'll see some weeks where the tackles are high and you're around the footy that you get that decent score, but could very easily be a 70 next week. So I don't mind that from you, Kesty.
And 97, we're not accepting 97s this week with our premium mids. So, I agree. I'd probably... I agree with your point about the Butters thing as well. So if you don't have a Dunkley, if you don't have one of those clear top guys, then he might definitely be your ticket there. But otherwise, trading him to a Sheasel, trading him to even a Flanders or something like that, it doesn't feel like you're getting much to me. So if it's only those guys you're going to, I don't feel like that's much of an upgrade versus if you can get a Tuke Miller to someone, like a Merrett or like one of those big guys in the midfield, I think that's more points gained. So... that will do with the chopping block there. We'll move on to our final segment of the day, talking about who are we going to. So before the pod, we sort of talked about...
We need a sound grab for trade targets.
We do need a sound grab. We haven't had one all season.
What would be a good sound grab for trade targets, boys? Anyway,
maybe like a bow and arrow hitting a target?
Yeah, just like a... just battle over.
We'll just record that. Let's record that. Let maybe the good people over at the Ball Boys HQ can give us some suggestions in the comments. They come up with all that good ideas, really. So.
True, we haven't actually had an original idea ourselves yet. It's been everyone else.
So give us some sound grabs for the trade targets. But let's go through. We've all got a top three. I'll start with Bales. Who's your top three trade targets? We'll maybe just run through them all together, see who's similar. And then maybe talk about some alternative options.
Yeah, so I did have two alternate options, but obviously we'll talk about them in a sec. But my top three, you can't go past the Essendon run. West Coast this week, North Melbourne the week after, both at Marvel. Merrett's got to be, for me, number one. I think that we know his ceiling's as high as anyone in the AFL. 140 on the weekend. I was a bit nervous about that game, actually. I thought he was going to cop some attention, but... he didn't, and scored obviously very, very well. So he'd be number one. Darcy Parish is number two. I know people are going to look and see that 93, got a low 100 the week before that. I think he got another 90-odd the week before that. But I don't think he scored 100 against Sydney in his career. I think it's 10 games, something he's gone under 100. So I wouldn't be looking at that. I'll be just looking at the fact he's got West Coast and North Melbourne. If anyone's going to be tagged, it's going to be Merrett. So I think Parish he could arguably be more a better pick than Merrett because he's more unique. He's not going to cop the attention. So but I've got Merrett there at number one, Parish two, and we mentioned before, Josh Dunkley, number three, came back last week, looked great, and a lot of people still didn't jump on because they wanted to wait one more week, and I'd be jumping on him. They'd be my top three.
And I think, Tim, you've got a similar list here, mate. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, I probably just prefer Dunkley above Parish just because I'm not a massive Parish fan. He can be a bit volatile, and I think I just prefer to go Dunks. And obviously he's got a top six forward, right? So if you don't have him, I think he's going to be a bit higher up. I think LDU deserves a look as well. Obviously with his last three average of 120. And look, the other thing that I wanted to say is probably what most people are actually thinking is Laird is probably the number one target to bring in this week. But I want to throw to the Laird man himself because he can walk us through exactly what's coming and why we don't have him on our list.
Yeah, well, I was a bit surprised that Tim and Cara didn't jump off last night when they heard some of the utter garbage that I was throwing out. But I would actually go Parish over Laird this week, which I never ever thought I'd be saying. I never thought I'd be saying anyone over Laird, to be honest. But we did say before about Gold Coast where Swallows gone to Laird two times. The past 2 times they've played each other. He went after quarter time in the game in Darwin, and I think Laird had a 12-13 disposal opening quarter, and he was on about 30.
Yeah, he was on for a big one.
Got tagged, and he got held to about a mid-80 score. So I just think that you can wait till the week after they got Brisbane at the Gab, which is still tough, but not going to cop a tag. Whereas I'm a bit worried about the tag this week. Whereas, as I said before, I don't think Parish is going to cop any attention. So, but I still think Lair's a good target. And if he doesn't get tagged, he can go massive. But yeah, I don't know what you boys think about that, but.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I've been eyeing off Parish for this round for the last few weeks. So he's my number one target. I'd almost even say he's my number one target over Zach Merrett just for the uniqueness factor. And like you said, if there is any attention, it'll go to Merrett, and Parish can run free. And he also just strikes. And we've talked about this in the preseason, Luke. Like he seems like the kind of guy that when he's got it on his terms, like he can score as big as anyone, and what better way than having
fair weather sailor is what you're saying.
Fair weather sailor, and what there'd be no better weather than going up against West Coast and North Melbourne.
That's pretty good weather. That's like Cancun.
That's Cancun right there. So I think he's going to have a big couple of rounds here. Josh Dunkley just because of the forward factor, and I'll also throw out Caleb Sarong as a target that I also really like. He's got Brisbane this week, which you normally would look at and go, that's a tough matchup. But Brisbane have been giving up a decent amount of points. Obviously, see the Suns that all their mids basically turned up on the weekend as well. And then after that, I think he has a West Coast matchup as well in back-to-back games. So I think that he is someone that you can definitely have a look at as a super high floor, somewhat unique kind of a player. Yeah, despite getting that off flog earlier in the podcast.
Are you worried about his ceiling? Because he hasn't really put up too many 120 scores. Are you more getting him in for that high floor, or?
I feel like he doesn't have like the 150 ceiling, but I'm still confident that he's going to be scoring between like that 110 and 130 zone. And if you can give me a 120 and a 130, like I'm pretty happy with that. He's gone over 130 once this year, but he's given us 3 120 pluses and a bunch of other scores over 110 as well. So I'm pretty happy with that. And as someone who's only gone under 100 twice this entire season, the first one of which was when he was being tagged in round 1. 3 times if you include that one as well. So I just feel really, really safe with him. And I still think there's a decent amount of ceiling there. It's sort of like what we talked about with Cogs a few weeks ago. Just because we haven't seen the ceiling yet doesn't mean that ceiling isn't there. He's got the role, he's got the ability to rack it up. So, I feel really good about him. I'm not too concerned about the lack of ceiling so far this season.
In terms of
your list?
Yeah, a few people that I'm looking at. Darcy Parish is a tricky one for me because on the very first podcast that we ever made, I said, pick players that you like to watch. That was kind of like my ethos, and then
And how's that going for you this
And then
year?
I proceeded to do the exact opposite, and it fucked me every time I did it. So, Darcy Parish for me is, without casting too much shade, I feel like there's a little bit of mental fragility there, like when the tension does come, but the matchup is so juicy, so there's every chance that I go against my rule and go there again this week. Laird was the guy that I sort of thought, Laird can score regardless, but now that Mr. Laird has been on the podcast, has warned me against it. It would be
wearing your Laird t-shirt too.
Well, I am. Yeah, I got the big boys on, so I'll tread lightly there. The other, in terms of just to throw out some different and spicy picks, because we've kind of all gone for
I think Parish and all those SN boys will be a popular trade.
I think they'll be popular trade in. I reckon if you were looking for a defender that is just in a bracket below like Doherty and Sicily, that hopefully can continue his good run, Gavin might be a different sort of pick. And then the other person that I thought, and this of course would have been a great move 2 weeks ago, but again, if you were just looking to swing for the fences, if you could take like Marshall down to Gawn, bank that, whatever it is, 120k, maybe you've got some cash in the bank, and then you could actually use that downgrade to turn, let's say, like a Butters into someone else, like a Dunkley or something, maybe that wouldn't be the most ridiculous move. So I'm not normally an advocate for like full spicy, but considering you boys kind of went vanilla, I'll throw out some just different scenarios. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Max Gawn is still definitely an option, even though the price gap is reduced. You're not making as much money, but we saw him outscore Marshall on the weekend. You got 20 points up and you made that money. So,
What were you going to say, Guesty?
I was going to say, speaking of spicy, especially with Adam Chera doing his hammy, Nick Newman in defence. I think he could be a real play as a spicy take in that defence line. Hey, he's been playing really well off that half-back line since Doc has gone a little bit more into the midfield.
Yep.
Last 4 scores, 108, 108, 93, 123. I'm not sure what's his run. Can't have a decent run. Saints, Melbourne,
Suns. Yeah, not too bad.
Saints.
Suns been giving up a lot of points. So I think Melbourne are pretty generous. So what's his price? It's like
782. 782. It's cheap as well, you know.
We know he's a guy that has a ceiling as well. So that's spicy.
I also still just love the Luke Ryan pick as well, as someone who I've talked about him being a great pick, and I just never have got him into my side at all this season. But it just seems hard to pull out and trade out one of those guys inside the those top 5 or 6 defenders. But I still think he's putting up a great season, and so if you can find a nice way to get to him, I still think that he is a good player to trade in. He's got the Eagles after this week as well, so good matchups on the horizon.
Sure. Now, before we sort of wrap things up, boys, were there any sort of bits and pieces that you thought might be worth some discussion this week before we...
Do we want to talk about the Gawn Marshall thing a little bit more? I mean,
I think we can flesh that
probably
out.
Was a play last week. I mean, probably still is a play. I mean, I was concerned about. I was really concerned about the matchup against North Melbourne this week, and with the potential, with obviously North Melbourne playing Cherry and Goldstein, that they might bring Grundy back in. But with Harrison Petty playing so well on the weekend, I kind of think that puts a line through Grundy coming back in, unless they want to rest Gawn this week a bit in preparation for finals. But still enough cash. I think it's and like Bale said before, did outscore Marshall, so I think it's a play. What do you guys think of that?
Well, my sort of question is, does it depend on where you're ranked? Like, are we all in agreement that it's like it's a play that gets you from, rank 160 into the top 100, or it's a play that gets you from rank, 1,200 into the top 1,000? Like, is that the kind of play that we see it as? It's not a play that you'd make if you were looking for safety? Is that like...
Yeah.
I don't know if the risk is as high as what it maybe is perceived to be, because Marshall is like so highly owned. Like, I think you're going to Max Gawn. Like, it's not like you're jumping on,
Xeri.
Yeah, Xeri or some unknown guy. Like, it's Max Gawn. He's the best ruckman in the comp. Like,
I mean, Marshall's as likely to get a rest as Grundy is to come back in. So I guess like there's risk in staying with...
I think I said this before as well. Grundy's not coming back in my opinion, and taking the ruck away from Gawn. Like, you can't watch... Like, and was it Petty who kicked the 6 goals or whatever on the weekend?
And kicked 4 as well.
So, like, their tall forward stocks are getting it done.
I couldn't agree more with you purely from like a football perspective, but I think that there would be some questions to answer from a few people at Melbourne if we've gone and recruited this fella to our club. Are we certain that Melbourne is going, no, we're cutting ties? Like, I
reckon it definitely feels that way. And I feel like there's been a lot of the talk that's what it's been like the last couple of weeks. Do you guys, have you seen it the same sort of way?
Yeah, I've heard a bit of talk, chatter here that Port might be a potential sort of club that are looking for him. So I think he's probably going to go. So Gawn's the captain. We haven't seen him be this solo ruck like he is at the moment for probably 3-4 years, because Jackson was there and taking a fair bit last couple of years. So
last time he averaged 120 points. So
yeah,
he single-handedly took that game away from Richmond on the weekend.
Yeah, he did.
I still think there's, and look, I was seriously looking at this move last week, and I've been progressing in an upwards direction. My team's looking pretty solid. I decided against it because I feel like there's more of a risk with Gawn than there is Marshall, just because They're storming into the finals. Gawn has been playing, high time on ground, and I just wonder whether, up against North or up against the Hawks, or whether they're going to rest him or give him a bit of a break in preparation for that finals run. I don't think it's a massive risk, but, kind of when weighing it up, I just feel like there's just that little bit too much risk with Gawn. And I was kind of afraid that it might derail my season if something like that did happen. But it's definitely a play. It's a serious play.
Yeah, for sure. The last thing I wanted to finish on before we wrap up today, guys, we're coming into finals for a lot of fantasy leagues. And some people, that aren't like yourself, they're guessy and in contention for a hat. They might be turning their attention to their league finals and things like that. So do you boys think that there's a difference in, your trades when you are focusing on leagues versus focusing on trying to get the overall rank? Are you looking at your opponent's matchup and just trying to pick, either matching one of their opponents, one of their players, or do you think there's much of a difference? And how would you play it if you're coming up against a tough matchup in your leagues focused, Bales and Guesty?
Yeah, I think the way to play is you got to start with your projected score. So kind of, and, maybe you got to do a little bit more detailed work and then, go and have a look at what your players are going to score compared to the matchup. And I think then the strategy is, okay, am I behind? Am I the underdog or am I, the kind of the favourite here? And then depending on which one you are will then go your strategy. If you're favourite, you might want to equalise to try and, reduce the chances of a unique player getting on top of you, right? On the flip side, maybe you try and go unique the other way. But then I think the big difference is also, I think captains is a really big place where you can get a leg up. So, look for that VC that could go, with a massive ceiling that is, not the popular captain for the week, because that's what could get you your league win.
I definitely agree, Guessy. You should definitely go to a trusted source for your captains each week.
That's right, mate. We're only ones that have credentials, mate.
Correct. Not
125 in the last two rounds, boys. Let's go.
But in terms of matchups, I was just going to say about this player, and probably not many people are going to be in this scenario, but Collingwood have got Hawthorn this week. Is there a play for your elimination final and your team's sitting pretty good? Could you trade Nick Dacos for a week? Is anyone considering that? I know a few people have asked me about that and have sort of gone Hawthorn, Finn McGuinness. I
like that,
hey. Is there a play there with the elimination final if you sort of got a play to win? Is that a play for coaches to look at for a week? It
was interesting.
Dacos going to play more midfield. Sorry, Luke. Mate. Dacos might play more midfield, in which case Finn might not go to him.
Yeah, it was interesting to see as well on the weekend, once St Kilda got right on top of that game in the first quarter, they then dropped the McGuinness tag on Sinclair as well, so how much that comes into it. But I agree, midfield may be less susceptible to it, but I don't mind it as a cheeky little play, Bales. Could be one of those ones that you brag about for years after if it comes off, eh?
I think you'd have to have a pretty good team to
exactly
do that.
Right.
If you've got any of those guys on the chopping block that we sort of spoke about, I think they're
getting off them first.
They're the priority. But it could be a play. I just think that we've seen Dacos get tagged before this season, and as good as what's his name McGuinness is, I still think that Dacos can at least get his sort of 80 to 90 points.
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents there. But thank you very much, guys, for jumping on the podcast today. Before we wrap up, let us know what you guys have got going on and where everyone can find all your content and pump yourselves up for a bit. I'll throw it to Guesty first.
Look, follow me on Twitter at TimGuestAU. In fact, you can follow me basically on any social pipe at TimGuestAU, whether you want to follow money stuff or fantasy footy stuff. I'll throw it to Bales for his Twitter handle and for the pod and for our AFL Fantasy Fanatics. But things I just did want to say, boys, it's a fucking great job this year. If we had an awards, if there was an awards night for Fantasy Footy podcast, you guys would definitely get Best New Talent. So it's been just mate, I've loved tuning in. I don't watch any YouTube live shows until this year, and I'm now sitting on the couch on a Friday afternoon watching your live show, and I'm really enjoying it. So good job, boys, and everyone's been enjoying it.
Thanks, mate.
Much appreciated. Yeah. It's worrying that people are actually enjoying what we're doing. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys. Bales, where can we catch you?
And then I'm just at Bales DT on Twitter and Instagram, and then Trudy Bales HD on YouTube. So and obviously go and follow the AFL Fantasy Fanatics account on Twitter, and then also go and follow it wherever you get your podcasts. And whatever. It's been great fun. It literally started from the AFLW Fantasy Twitter space and just said, Tim, let's start a podcast. And Tim said, yep, let's do it. And it's been fantastic. We've obviously had you boys on there multiple times this year. We've had amazing guests on there. And that's the thing that's great about fantasy communities. Everyone is willing to collaborate with one another, go on everyone's pods, share opinions. And that's what's so good about the fantasy community. And I can only echo what Tim said about you boys doing such a great job every sort of Monday, Tuesday night. Listen to you boys on the wrap up and then on the Friday show with the beers and whatever. I don't know the amount of times I've sat back and just absolutely pissed myself laughing just with some of the content that comes out. So
laughing along with us, not at us, mate.
And good quality information. So if people watching haven't subscribed to your channel yet, what are you doing? You got to do it. You got to subscribe.
Appreciate that, guys, and completely echo the sentiment about the community and how great everyone is. Mitch and I often talk without the headsets on and talk about the fact that we reckon, maybe aside from the traders, you two are two of the hardest working people in fantasy with content coming out. I reckon Bales has got a video out every day. So keep it up, Bales, because I know that everyone loves it. So much appreciated, guys.
Mate. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. And you heard the man before. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the video or the podcast and the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Give this video a big thumbs up. Go over
likes.
to
50 likes on the video.
Give me 50,000 likes while you're at it as well. But go over to the AFL Fantasy Fanatics YouTube but Truly Bales HD YouTube channel and the AFL Fantasy Fanatics podcast. Make sure you subscribe to those boys, and we'll catch you guys on Friday for some beers, talking some big boys and your trade targets. Laters.